This is a world where your favorite fashion trends were born on the battlefield. From the classic trench coat to the timeless bomber jacket, men's fashion as we know it owes a surprising debt to wars and military uniforms. What if I told you the reason you rock that pea coat today goes back to 19th century sailors? Strap in, because we're diving into how wars have shaped what you wear every day. Have you ever heard of a blood chit? And no, I'm not talking about some type of cardiovascular disease. No, what I'm referring to are cloth patches that were sewn inside flight jackets that were made famous by the Flying Tigers during World War II. So what's this got to do with fashion? Because it speaks to the legendary status of the A2 leather bomber jacket and the MA1 flight jacket. Anytime Hollywood wants to portray an actor as being strong and adventurous, they're going to put him in a leather flight jacket. If you personally just want a functional and good-looking jacket, then go with an MA1 flight coat. And beyond the blood chit, flight jackets were also pioneering in their use of new materials. At the time, they were using a fire-resistant polyester type material that was inexpensive to make, and to this day we're seeing used in jackets around the world. In addition, you could turn the jacket inside out. Inside the jacket, you had a bright orange. And we see this reversible clothing all over the place. Why did they use this in the military? Because if you're a downed pilot and that helicopter is coming in to save you, you want to be spotted, whether you're in the water, whether you are in a dry land. You don't want to wear anything camouflage, so you're turning that jacket inside out so that you can be spotted by search, air, and rescue. Let's talk about camouflage right here. Check out this camo kilt. Any of you guys out there kilt wearers, let me know in the comments below, and I want to hear your opinion about camouflage in general. I used to be against it, then I got a pair of camo shorts like this right here. Check out these camo shorts. I find that they are so easy to wear. Yes, they are casual, but when you're wearing shorts, you're casual in general. I find pairing them with a nice dark colored polo, a light colored polo, going with even some nice shoes with this, all of a sudden I'm having fun. I'm bringing in a pattern that normally is very difficult to match, but when you wear it with shorts, and again, you wear it just a solid colored shirt, I think it looks pretty good. Menswear item with a strong military history I'm going to talk about is actually multiple items. We're talking about coats. And depending on what war, actually we saw different coats come out of each war and become more popular. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments which jackets you know had a military history and I didn't cover in this video. But let's go to the Boer War. Initially, that's where we saw the trench coat, but it wasn't until World War I the trench coat was basically the preferred coat of officers in the trenches, made by, I think it was Burberry, made some of the best ones, the initial ones. It was made with a particular material that made it a little bit water resistant, so a man could literally sleep in this jacket, stay somewhat warm, and they were a prized possession. So we can look at the movie Casablanca. You know, what is he wearing in some of those iconic scenes? A trench coat. Many of these men came out of that war keeping their trench coats, wanting to get more use out of them, just loving them. It's been an iconic piece ever since. The duffel coat as well. Out of World War II, we saw the duffel coat, a very warm, heavy coat, something that can still to this day actually be worn with suits. Also out of World War II, we saw the bomber jacket. Now the bomber jacket, other variations known as the tank jacket, this is where the jacket was cut shorter because a man needed to be able to get in and out of a tight spot. Imagine a guy going on a bombing run and wearing this jacket, or perhaps being in a tank. In any of these cases, he needs mobility, and at the same time, he's got to be able to stay warm, especially for those bombers up at a high altitude. Why in the world are Europeans starting to wear bracelets with clocks on them? Nowadays, we call these wristwatches, but back in 1916, you had pretty much only pocket watches, and they were not very common. You had to have money to have a pocket watch because, let's just face it, the intricacies, they were all handmade. This was something that was a big deal. It was a status symbol. Pretty much you either had a lot of money or you worked in a profession like you operated a train, and therefore you needed to be able to tell the time so there wasn't going to be any accidents or anything like that. Point being is that this was something that very few people had. But when you're on the front, 1914, 1915, trench warfare, these military officers all had watches. This was something that they bought themselves, and they were trying to figure out how to best carry these things because they didn't want to be pulling them out of their pockets. You know, you're about to do, a charge, and you wanted to make sure everything was lined up. Timing had to be perfect here. So in that case, all of a sudden, they're basically finding ways to strap them to the wrists. They were taking bands, they were taking bracelets, they were actually even affixing them to their clothing. Per military request, a number of wristwatches were commissioned, and after the war, the wristwatch started taking off. It became a fashion trend, and to this day, it has now replaced waist, the pocket watch, and wrist watches, even if now they've gone high tech, are something that we still see that men and women will love and wear. From the combat boot, we've seen many variations. Initially, we saw the chukka come out of the desert boot. This was of a British design, popular during World War II, and now we see a wide range of companies that make them in suede or leathers or other variations, but it still is something when you find them with a rubber sole can actually be very comfortable and was made to be something to be able to wear in warmer weather, at the same time give support to the ankle. Belts and suspenders weren't just for holding up your pants. They were actually there to provide support because you were armed. You were actually carrying a sword. I was using this as a belt. The suspenders were there as well to be able to distribute the weight. If you look at old military uniforms, you'll notice that they actually have pouches on the suspenders and that it puts the weight over on the shoulders, which is much better than trying to hang it on the waist. So your suspenders and your belts have a military history. Now, this next fashion trend was started by a military regulation change in 1913. Before then, undershirts basically had buttons on them, and since the 1880s, they had been using this design. It wasn't very comfortable, and it wasn't very functional. Well, the military said, you know what, we need these guys working, cleaning, the top of decks and stuff on boats, so let's give them a piece of gear that is simple and that basically frees up the arms. The T-shirt was invented. 1913, original designs were actually made from wool. They took a long time to dry. It just wasn't a great design, but eventually within a period of about 5 to 10 years, we saw that transition to the cotton T-shirt as we know it. And they went with white because it was incredibly cheap. Since about 1920, we saw the white T-shirt. All of a sudden and this was underwear. This was not something that was shown. It wasn't until the 1950s that we saw the white T-shirt all of a sudden being worn under a leather jacket on the big screen, that all of a sudden T-shirts started coming into their own. And then the late 1970s, 1980s, we saw the fashion tee all of a sudden putting, a little slogan or logo or something, I love New York, across the tee. All of a sudden made it something that people would wear every day. Cargo pants. They became popular during World War II simply because they're practical. Think about it. With a regular pair of pants, you've got that high pocket, but you've got to lift your jacket up. If you had a cargo belt on or you had lots of things on here, it's a little bit hard to lift that up and reach in. Cargo pants were actually at the length of your hands. You could just reach down, grab extra ammunition, maybe food over on this side, and because of that, they're still in uniforms today. Now, in civilian wear, do I think that most people should be wearing cargo pants? I think they're a little bit overdone, but I do think that there are stylish ways to still wear cargo pants. The next fashion trend coming out of the military, the classic aviator. So this goes back to 1929, Army Air Corps General McReady. He basically noticed his pilots were starting to get headaches. They're flying at higher altitudes. It's just the rays, it was just really affecting him, the sun. So he said, hey, we need to design some type of protection. That's where the aviators came from. And they've got that classic design that basically covers the entire eye socket. That was the big thing. In 1936, they started selling these to the public and they started becoming popular. We saw them in a variety of movies. James Stewart wore them in the 1956 film, The Spirit of St. Louis. Peter Fonda wore them in the amazing 1969 film Easy Rider, but it was 1986's Top Gun with Tom Cruise that put aviators on the map as the has-to. Basically, anyone that's anybody that wants a pair of sunglasses, aviators are where you start. And seriously, it makes sense because they complement almost any face shape and they just look good. Now, if you're looking to level up your style, you really need to check out my free community over on School. I've set this community up so we've got free classes that you can make your way through step by step and learn the basic foundations of men's style. We actually have giveaways. In fact, this year alone, I've given away over $15,000 in gear that has accumulated here in my office, and I love sending it out to you guys free of charge. And I have to say, the men that are in this group are friggin' awesome. We've got a no a-hole policy. People treat each other with respect. And what we've managed to create in this community is a place where a man can come in and ask questions and get some solid advice. So gents, use the link in the description of today's video. Go check out our free communities on School. These are for you to become the man you know yourself to be. The suit jacket I'm wearing right here, this has a storied military history. Go back and look at old dress uniforms, even look at modern day uniforms in the Marine Corps, in the US Army, in the United States Navy. You will recognize many of the features on a classic suit jacket. That's because the classic suit jacket came out of the military uniform. If you look at this right here, maybe put a few pockets right here, put some medals right here. This could be an epaulets right here. all of a sudden you've got a military uniform. In the Marine Corps, we actually used to have leather about 100, maybe 150 years ago right here, which would protect you from a not well-placed sword slash. If it was well-placed, you're probably going to lose your head. But the point being is that the clothing we wear today has a military history. Yes, even that suit. Next up, let's talk about neckwear, specifically ornamental neckwear. We're talking about the necktie, because you think about it, what functional purpose does a necktie serve? Well, the answer for over 2,000 years is it brings color. It disrupts pattern. It actually is a great identifier of what unit you're with. Going back to 200 BC, we look at the Qin dynasty, those terracotta soldiers. Guess what? They are wearing silk cords around their neck to identify what units they're with. Roman legionnaires wore scarves not only for protection, but again to identify what unit you were with and your rank. In Europe's 30-Year War, Croatian mercenaries serving in the French military wore scarves. They wore these neck pieces that were, yes, decorative and just simply to show who they were with and what they were about. And if you think that this is old-fashioned, you ought to do your research on regimental neckties and the different type of club neckties out there still worn over in England and the UK. And this is something that, hey, some people will take an affront. If you're wearing their colors, if you're wearing their unit and you didn't serve, if you didn't go to that club, because it used to be, go back 1910, you were only allowed to wear neckties that you had actually earned. So you went to this school, you were part of this club, you had served in these regiments, you therefore could wear these colors. If not, well, good luck. You were just wearing something plain. The turtleneck sweater. Now, the turtleneck sweater was around well before World War II, but it was the Secret Service, the submariners, that made it popular, especially in the movies after World War II, where these guys, they're in a cold, cramped submarine. And what better uniform, what better outfit than a turtleneck sweater that's going to fit close to the body, have a tight knit weave so it's not going to grab onto a lot of things, keep them warm, and be something that they can wear again and again, get dirty, it's still going to look okay. So when we saw a number of the movies, it became popular in the 1950s and the 1960s, and to this day is a menswear classic. And let's not forget about khakis, chinos, that tan color that we see on men's trousers around the world, and women have adopted it as well. This actually comes back 1845. We had the English over in India, and they realized, what, these white pants are not great. They're too bright. We need to go for something a little bit darker that's going to better fit in. In fact, it was 1848 that they officially adopted this as a color. They were using different dyes. It was relatively inexpensive, and it really made sense in camouflage. Now, the United States didn't figure this out till about 1898 in the Spanish-American War. All of a sudden, we started adopting khaki. Again, we saw this pick up and become part of regular uniforms, just, office uniforms with the military throughout World War I, World War II, and it then bled over into just regular college wear in the 1950s. To this day, khakis, chinos, and the use of the color tan are a staple in men's fashion and women's fashion around the world. Cummberbund, and this is over in black tie. Now, this comes out of India via the British. What they saw were the Indian military guys wearing sashes. They liked the look, so they adopted the cummerbund in their black tie evening wear. They brought this back over to England. A lot of guys liked it more than the waistcoat, so it's now at the same level and is basically the waist covering. It basically eliminates the line between the trousers and the dress shirt. So what video to watch next? How about how I rank military uniforms around the world? Who's got the best uniforms? Well, I think it's pretty obvious who's got the best, but find out what I say in this video right here. I also rank some really bad ones, but yeah, I enjoyed this video. It's a good one.